Hi, I'm Richard Maraj, Senior Minister at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center, and I want to thank you for visiting our website and for tuning in to today's message. If you feel inspired by today's talk, I really encourage you to make a donation by hitting that button below and making a contribution to this ministry. It'll allow us to continue these messages online and to do the great work we do here at Unity of Phoenix, which is to inspire people to live better lives. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for your support, and we hope to see you at a Sunday real soon.
Morning again, everyone. And a shout out to everybody who tunes in and watches us online. So Fred and his family, including their mother-in-law, were vacationing in the Middle East, and when they were visiting Jerusalem, Fred's mother-in-law passed away. So with the death certificate in his hand, he went to the American consulate office to arrange to have her body sent back to the United States for a proper burial. And so after hearing about his mother-in-law's death, the consul told Fred that it would be extremely expensive to fly her body back to the United States, and it would cost about $5,000. And continuing on, the consulate said, in most cases when things like this happen, what people often do is bury their loved one here, and the cost for it is just about $200. Fred thought about it for a few minutes and said, it doesn't matter what its cost is. I will like to send her back for sure. That's what I want. And the consulate said, wow, you must have really loved your mother-in-law very deeply, considering the huge difference in price. And he said, no, not at all. In fact, it was the opposite. But I heard there was a case many years ago where a person was buried in Jerusalem, and 3 days later they rose from the dead. And I just don't want to take that chance. So, okay. It's not right at all. Only the men are clapping. That's not okay. But anyway. So how many people have ever gotten a bit scared or thought something would go wrong and you decided not to take a chance? Anybody have a situation like that in their life? Or how many people ever want to try something new, do something different, and you got a little nervous and you decided to play safe and do nothing? Or how many people have ever been stuck in a routine, staying in your comfort zone for so long that after a while, your life felt stagnant and lifeless and dull? Anybody have that experience? The fact is, with every one of us, sometimes we get scared. Sometimes we've been hurt, or we've experienced loss, or that we've been knocked down so hard or so often. We lose confidence in ourselves. We doubt ourselves, and we are afraid to take any risks, to take any chances. So we start living more cautiously and more fearfully. We don't want to go all out. Sometimes we're even scared to even try anything new because we're afraid of being embarrassed, of failing, of looking foolish. So we make excuses and procrastinate. And we try our best to avoid doing things we know we want to do, things we know that'll be good for us to do. We avoid them because we're too afraid. How many people have ever had an area in your life where you played it safe and played small instead of going big and stepping out? Anybody ever have some of those? 2 weeks ago we started a fabulous series on an amazing book called On Fire by John O'Leary. And what we've been really looking at is, how do you handle life when things aren't going your way? How do you handle life through the tough times, through the difficult experiences? How do we handle life, when we feel devastated, when we feel hopeless? Because the fact is, everybody wants a happy life. Everybody wants a meaningful and fulfilling experience of life. And I believe one of the keys to have that happy and successful and fulfilling experience is in how we deal with disappointments, how we deal with the traumas, the unexpected losses, the disappointments, the betrayals. And often when things happen like that, we're always shocked and surprised. But I believe they're an important part of life, and especially in how we handle them. Jesus said, in this life there will be trials and tribulations. He gave us a very clear warning that in a part of life is that there are going to be some missteps, some mistakes. There are going to be some frustrations. There's going to be some hurt and pain. But he also said, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. What he is saying is, be of good cheer, because no matter what these challenges are, that there's a spirit in you that can rise above. There's a spirit in you that can make it through. But more than just make it through and rise above, that through the experience of moving through those difficulties, we gain greater insight we expand our faith. We get greater awareness. We have a greater appreciation, a greater strength. We increase our capacity to create and to make an absolute difference and live a happier and more fulfilling life. So today we're in the third week of our 4-week series on the book On Fire, and it's subtitled 7 Choices to Ignite a Radically Inspired Life. Week 1, we talked about choice number 1, which is to choose to be fully responsible for our lives. Because that is the truth. Every one of us is fully responsible for every area of our lives. I am fully responsible for every area of my life. Together, I am fully responsible for every area of my life. Deep breath. Sometimes being responsible scares us. It seems like a burden. But the truth is, when we think about being responsible, we should feel liberated, empowered, and excited, because that's what responsibility does. It doesn't put our happiness in someone else's hands to blame or to save us. It means that we have that power and those resources. I am fully responsible for every area of my life. Together, I am fully responsible for every area of my life. Deep breath. I want you to feel liberated, empowered, and excited, because that's what it means to be fully responsible. Second choice that we make is to choose not, to hide our scars, our hurt, our pain, our regret, our shame. Sometimes we hide behind these masks so people will like us and appear to be different than we are, more perfect. But what happens is when we hide our hurt and pain, sometimes we're even hiding it from ourselves, is that we end up withholding some of our beauty and our creativity and our talent. Sometimes we hide our own light when we hide because we're hiding aspects of ourselves. Third one is to choose to find the meaning in your life. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, when you know the why, you can endure almost any how. So that even when we're going through difficulties, when you know that there's a purpose for your life, that there is meaning, that that there's something for you to achieve to get through this, that is the thing that drives us forward and helps us make us through the difficulty. And choice 4 is to choose a positive attitude. That attitude hugely impacts everything, and particularly the outcome and the experience of difficulties. By being grateful for all the good in our lives and being grateful even for the challenge that we go through. And sometimes to help us, we need to ask ourselves questions like, so what is positive in this? What can I gain from this? What in this is there for me to be grateful for? And how can I use this to become a better person or to become stronger or wiser and be more successful? That is the kind of attitude when it comes to handling those challenges. So today we're looking at choice number 5 and choice number 6. As a little recap, remember that John O'Leary was burned on 100% of his body, 87% of those being third-degree burns at the age of 9 when he was playing with fire and a can of gasoline in his family garage. He was bandaged from head to toe because having no skin is painful. You are highly susceptible to infection, and it's hard to regulate body temperature. They thought he was going to die. He ended up spending 5 months in hospital, wrapped from head to toe, and he was strapped to his bed so he wouldn't move, so he could heal. But a part of that, they would do skin grafts, like about the size of a postage stamp from his scalp on his body. But what happened over time, while the skin was helping him, is that it was also shrinking and putting more strain on his muscles, which had atrophied, and his joints, and limiting movement. So what they had to do was stretch him every single day. Stretch every joint, stretch every muscles, and the most excruciating was his knees, which was vital to him walking in the future. See, without stretching, and all that constriction and lack of movement and flexibility would inhibit his ability to ever walk again, and would inhibit his range of motion, his flexibility, and him being more active. At 9 years old, he didn't realize it, but later on he realized that stretching is a vital component to life. That when we don't stretch, we tend to constrain. We tend to be limited. We tend to be stagnant. We tend to play and get accustomed to playing small. Stretching is never comfortable, but it's a vital part of growth and expansion. It's a vital part of opening ourselves to live a fuller life. And it isn't just for the body and muscles, but stretching is vital in all things. In relationships, when we stop growing together and learning together and sharing, when we stop listening and stop forgiving, a relationship can grow stagnant and begin to wither and contract. Organizations that don't learn and try different things and stop investing in their employees and dreaming big, they can constrict and be limited and rigid. In our health, not paying attention and exercising and eating well, can actually limit our level of health. Not doing strength and cardio. And what happens, it doesn't happen in one day, it happens over time when we don't pay attention and don't allow ourselves to stretch. In the book of Matthew, chapter 12, Jesus, I think, gives a fabulous example of the power of stretching in our lives. And here's what it says. He left that place and entered their synagogue. A man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, "Is it unlawful to cure on the Sabbath?" so that they might accuse him. He said to them, suppose one of you had only one sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will you not lay your hand on it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? So it is lawful and good to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And the stretched out hand that was withered suddenly was restored. So two things here. For the man whose hand was withered, for it to be healed, he had to stretch out. He had to expand it from being contracted. And it just shows that in life, that if we want something greater, we need to expand beyond where we currently are. And let's go to the context of what Jesus is doing here. The Jewish people were upset that he was healing on the Sabbath because you weren't supposed to do work on the Sabbath. And Jesus was saying, hey, that's a strict rule. That if you follow that rule, which was just supposed to be to pause and rest from our work, if you do it to the extreme of not healing someone and letting them suffer, you're missing compassion and love. And what Jesus was trying to do is stretch their minds beyond a limited belief. And sometimes, if you look at Jesus' whole ministry, it was to stretch people's in every way, to stretch their heart, to be more loving, compassionate, and forgiving. To stretch their minds, to be more aware of greater possibilities, greater faith. To stretch their imagination, to hold a vision, to stretch them to believe that all things are possible. Jesus was showing that stretching in physically or stretching the heart or stretching the mind is a vital part of a happy and fulfilling life. Coincidentally, the word heaven means to expand. That when we expand our faith, expand our love and joy, that's heavenly. And it helps us experience more of the fullness of the riches of the kingdom of heaven. Every one of us can sometimes get constricted and stuck. And if we want a happier life, we need to stretch. So after my car accident, I got home from the hospital of being there for 5 months. I got really kind of scared to leave the house, and I didn't think I'd ever have a job or be able to do anything. And so my brother had suggested that I leave the house, and he introduced me to an organization called Toastmasters. Everybody heard of that? And so I was really scared. Every time my brother suggested, my mouth would get dry, my heart start racing, my stomach feel queasy. And he said, I'll go with you. I said, great. So we went together, and this meeting happened, and people were so good speaking. I was like, whoa. And then they offered for me to participate in table topics. I just said, mm-mm. And then my brother participated. At the end of the meeting, they said, would you like to say something? I said, no. I got up and left that thing, did not go back for 2 years. Fast forward 2 years, I'm in Sacramento, staying at a family friend's home for about 4 weeks. So my brother calls me and he says, hey, since you're out of town, you don't need people anyway, and you can't really embarrass yourself because you'll be leaving in 4 weeks, call a Toastmaster club. So he calls me back. I found a Toastmaster club. I said, yeah, man, but I don't have a car. I don't know how to get there, so I can't do it. He says, you phone the president of the club. Tell him the situation. I guarantee you, somebody will give you a ride. So I phone, and again, a stretch to phone somebody who doesn't know me, explain the situation, and they said they'd give me a ride. So I'm standing in front of the house on that day, waiting for the ride, and I made this prayer. Please, God, don't let them be hurt, but let them get a flat tire so they can't make it. Prayer was not answered, so they were there. I was scared the whole time, but this time when they said, do you want to participate in table topics? I did. I got a little ribbon, and that was cute. I was there for the 4 weeks. I did a talk, did table topics every week, and then they said, hey, you're good. Maybe you should come back for our speech contest. I'm thinking, speech contest? So I thought that was interesting. So I went back to Canada. My brother found me a club. I went there, and there was a speech contest coming up. And I used to love competing in sports. That was the thing. I thought, wow, this is good. Made my heart race again, mouth dry, got scared, but I started competing in these contests. And for some reason, I had good fortune. I ended up winning over 30 speaking competitions and went to the World Championship. Then after that, my brother said, hey, why don't you just not speak at Toastmasters stuff? Why don't you go into the community? Phone organizations like the Rotary Club and the Lions Club, to prisons, high schools. You phone and get out there. Again, terrified, but I did what he said. So I spoke in high schools. I spoke in prisons. I spoke Lions Club, Rotary Club, started raising money for different organizations. And then he said, hey, how about getting paid? And so, you know, when you've been speaking free for an organization for 3 years, suddenly asking for money, they're not quite as thrilled with you about it, but some did start giving me money. But I was only getting like 1 gig a month, you know, one every 2 months. And I was like, I'm not going to make a living on this. This is just, so I said to my brother, look, man, I've tried. I'm just going to quit. I'm not going to do anything. I'm never going to make money doing this. And he looked at me and he said, Rich, it would be a sin for you not to speak. I will help you. We'll get marketing thing. I'll show you. We'll make calls. We'll get you gigs. And so we made marketing stuff. I started mailing stuff out, making phone calls. My sister got me to speak at her company, which was Speedy Muffler King. And then I ended up speaking for the Marketing and Advertising Professional Association. I spoke for Xerox. I spoke for the Royal Bank of Canada, the Cooperators Insurance. I mean, things started going well. And then I got the call to ministry, and I'm thinking, speaking in church, my heart started racing. My head was hurting, but that stretched. But my point is, there was always some stretching, and all the stretching helped give me the skills that I needed to do what I was born to do and what I'm doing today. The fact is, in all of our lives, if we want our lives to keep progressing, we need to stretch. I love all the common things I have with this John O'Leary, who I just love and admire so much. He was asked to speak, and his first gig to tell his story was to a bunch of Girl Scouts. It terrified him. It was a stretch. He'd never done it. Slowly he got asked and more. He was up to being asked 13 times in a year, and he felt so good, he thought maybe I should leave my job. He was in real estate development and go full time into this. He met a lady who he thought he could hire. She was phenomenal. He knew she'd be the one, but her salary was the entire year's worth of what he earned in the previous year. So he thought, that's too risky, too much of a stretch. But he prayed about it and talked about it, and then he realized that was the right thing to do. So he made that big leap of quitting his job, hiring this woman for the entire salary of what he made, and they tripled their income in that first year. But it wouldn't happen if it didn't stretch. So what is the area in your life that you know it's time for you to stretch? Where in your life is life not progressing? You feel a bit stagnant, and you know that it's time to shake things up. And the only way to do it is by stepping beyond what you know. And maybe your stretch is to change jobs. Maybe your stretch is to go back to school. Maybe your stretch is to say yes to something. Maybe your stretch is to say no. You know, maybe it's to make new friends. Maybe it's to make a new commitment to your health and your self-care. Maybe it is to go get some professional help for an issue you know you haven't dealt with. Maybe your stretch is to be more honest and vulnerable with yourself and honest and vulnerable with your partner. Maybe it's to call an estranged family member and to reconnect and maybe do some forgiveness and letting go of the past. Maybe it's to pursue your goals and dreams. Maybe it's to move on from some unhealthy situation and start over again. Maybe it's to join Toastmasters. Maybe it's to take this 3P prosperity class and take your life to the next level. You know, in life we think when things are uncomfortable, we think it means something's bad, something's wrong, and we should run from it. And the fact is, being uncomfortable sometimes is exactly what that helps us pull up the resources and talents that are in ourselves that we wouldn't do had we not been pushed to a place where we had to stretch. Stretching is a good thing and a vital thing and an important thing that helps us expand beyond who we currently are to something even greater and better. We all want our lives to change, but we don't want to change. We want our lives to expand in love and joy, but we don't want to expand ourselves. Things that are easy are seldom as worthwhile as things that are hard. They tend to teach us more, grow us more, and expand us more. So my question again for you is, where is life calling you to stretch? What is the action? What is the risk? What is the chance that life is calling you to take? And where is life calling you to say, I'm going all in? So John's parents got a call from an elderly man who wanted to come visit John, and it was 6 months after he'd gotten out of the hospital. So it was about a year after he got burned. And he watched as his truck pulled up, pickup truck, and this old man made his way to the front door. He came in. The guy says, my name is Glenn Cunningham. You ever heard of me? He said, no. Well, Glenn Cunningham was an American athlete who at one point held the world record for the 1 mile. He got a silver medal in the 1936 Berlin Olympics, and he said these words to John. He said, John, when I was a little boy, I got burned in a fire. I was trying to start the stove in our schoolhouse with my older brother. It was cold, and we were the first ones to arrive that day, and we wanted to get the stove burning so the room would be warm when the others got there for class. John, I had no idea that the night before they had switched the kerosene with a can with gasoline. Next to the burning stove, the can ignited and everything was on fire. The entire room turned to a flame. My brother was my best friend. He was part of every childhood memory I had and was with me in the school that morning. He died 9 days after the fire. John, I was burnt all over, especially on my legs. They were the worst. And even though I was burnt that badly, I was grateful to be alive, but it was so painful and intense that sometimes I wanted to die. The doctor wanted to amputate both my legs, but my mother begged and promised that she would wrap the bandages and make sure the infection would stay away. It took a long time, John, a long time before I got out of bed, a long time before I could stand, a long time before I could walk, and a long time before I could even think about running. But I didn't drive up all the way here to talk about myself. I drove up here because I believe in you, John. You have come far, and you are just at the beginning. But I want you to picture yourself doing whatever you desire to do. Visualize it. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. You'll be able to do whatever you believe you can. So set high goals and expect high achievement. Don't give in when things get hard. Don't give up on your dreams. That's the key. Never give up. At the age of 10, being home from the hospital after 5 months and trying to rehab and figure out his life, John said that moment profoundly changed how he looked at his situation. 2 weeks later, Glenn Cunningham died at the age of 78. You know, sometimes I think this story reminds us that we can't do everything for ourselves. The thing that makes us successful in life, that we always need somebody's help. There's people in our lives who have believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves, that helped encourage us and inspire us and support us to achieve what we have achieved in life, and to remind us not to give up, to keep on trying. You know, John had a lot of people in his life, as we all do, who have helped us. One was a nurse named Big Roy. And, you know, he got bandaged every day and then unbandaged and put in a bath and then rebandaged again every day to keep the infection away. Initially, they would put him in a wheelchair and send him, but Big Roy was so big, he'd pick him up and carry him in a vertical position, and he'd always whisper, "You're going to walk one day, boy. You're going to walk one day." And he'd always, what's this guy talking about? My legs are so withered, I'm never going to. And every day he'd pick him up, take him to this bath and chair, and he's, "You're going to walk one day, boy. You're going to walk one day." And he did that. So fast forward 24 years later, he's speaking for the Alabama Power Company because there were some tornadoes, and he spoke numerous times over 2 to 3 months, developed some great relationships, and they'd all heard his story over and over again. To thank John on his last presentation, they flew, as a surprise, John's parents in, which was really, really cool. But they also flew Big Roy in. And it was a cool surprise because John had not seen him in 24 years and literally credits him as one of the main reasons why he and Glenn Cunningham, why he walked. And they were chatting afterwards and saying how it was surprised to be able to see each other, what a surprise it was, how things turned out. And Roy says to John, "You know what the biggest surprise for me was?" And John says to him, "What?" And Roy says, "The biggest surprise to me was to learn after 24 years that I mattered." John, I did my job. I loved my job. I loved my patients. but I never really understood until today that I mattered. There are people in our lives who believe in us and encourage us at those moments, and sometimes we never tell them that they had such an impact on our lives. And for us to live an inspired life, I think it's important for us to remember and give thanks to those people, even if they've passed, and when we can, to reach out to them and tell them the difference that they've made. Because he was so blessed to hear what a difference his actions in support of John made. So let's go back to a few days after the burn in the hospital. John was visited by Jack Buck, who was the announcer of the St. Louis Cardinals, the voice. And he came in, and he was all in, he had to be covered up. And he came in and said, "Wake up, kid." And the reason he came in, because he heard the kid was probably going to die. And he says, "Wake up, kid. Listen to me. You're going to live. You got that? You're going to survive. And when we get out of here, we're going to celebrate. We're going to call it John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. Keep fighting, kid." I think Jimmy shared this story. It was just so powerful. I want to share it again. So he came back the next day, and he said, "Wake up, kid. It's me again. Listen to me. You're going to live. You got that? You're going to survive. And when we get out of here, we're going to celebrate. And we're going to call it John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. Keep fighting, kid. I'll see you soon." He did that same thing, saying those exact words, and just left for those 3 days. And over time, when he was calling games while John was in the hospital for those 5 months, he would sometimes mention John's name. Finally, a month after the 5 months in the hospital, when they got home, it was John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. The family went down. Jack Buck came and rolled him in the wheelchair to the field, to the clubhouse to meet the players, up to the luxury boxes. He left with all kinds of baseball caps and jerseys. It was amazing. An incredible day. Life-changing day. Incredible. But then, 3 or 4 days after, he gets a package from Jack Buck, and it's an autographed baseball from the all-star shortstop of the St. Louis Cardinals, Ozzie Smith, and a note from Jack. "Hey, kid, if you want another baseball, you have to write a thank you note to the man who signed this first one, your friend Jack Buck." Immediately, John thought, what is this guy kid write a note? I can't write. Didn't he notice at the game that I couldn't even hold a cup, that my dad had to hold a cup to drink all those 8 Cokes? And then he realized, of course he did. That's why he sent the ball. And John was struggling writing. He didn't want to write. He was trying. It was so hard because he had no fingers holding, with his bandages, the pen, it wasn't legible. And they were struggling. His parents were trying to encourage him to write. But when he got this from Jack Buck, it gave him the why for him to endure anyhow. So he worked and worked and worked. Finally, he was able to finish. He had to start over several times. A thank you note. It was barely legible, but he sent it. Interestingly, a few days after that, he got a second baseball that said, "Kid, if you want a third baseball, you need to write a thank you note to the guy who signed this second one, your friend, Jack Buck." The Cardinals got into the World Series that fall, and at that point, Jack Buck had sent 60 baseballs, and John had written 60 thank you notes. An amazing thing that inspired this young man. And then, 10 years later, when John graduated from high school, Jack Buck sent another gift and said, "Kid." John was starting to wonder if Jack knew his name, because everything was kid. For 10 years, so he just called him Kid. It said, "Kid, this means a lot to me. I hope it means a lot to you. This is the baseball I received when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's made of crystal. It's priceless. Don't drop it. Your friend, Jack." And so the cool thing here is, so just coming to the hospital and saying, "Kid, you're going to live. We're going to do that," was huge. And then he did the whole John O'Leary Day at the park. But then he went beyond and started sending baseballs, 60 baseballs over 2 or 3 months. And then 10 years later, he gave him a gift on his graduation. I mean, this guy went the extra mile. He answered the question, what more can I do? And he literally changed this kid's life. See, everyone wants to have a life of success. But what's important is to have a life of significance. And significance comes by helping other people. That's what's going to take our lives to another level. It's important to thank those who have helped us, but it's important to be someone who helps someone, who encourages someone, who believes in someone, who gives someone else hope, who mentors someone, who does little acts of kindness. Because those little things, just like Big Roy, touch our lives in ways that we don't even realize. When Jesus said, no greater love than this, than a man who would lay down his life for another, we always think, like it's catching a bullet for someone. No. What it's saying is no greater love than someone who will put down their own concerns for a minute to care about someone else's feelings, to care about someone else's needs and desires. And in simple ways, that is one of the greatest expressions of love, is to just care about someone. Because when we do, it blesses them, it blesses us, and it helps increase the level of love and good in the world. Life isn't easy. There are trials. There are hurts and disappointments. But we can make some choices in those areas. And no matter how hurt we are, choose to stretch. Choose to step out. Choose to take a risk, take a chance, and do something that you know that life is calling you to stretch, because it will expand you to greater level of joys. And also choose to thank and recognize the people who have made your life what it is today, as simple, as small, and then be someone who makes a difference in another person's life. And that is how we choose to live a radically inspired life. God bless you all.